Welcome to the training camp edition of the Dolphins in Depth Miami Herald podcast, breaking down action and everything we saw for the first day of training camp. Right now, I'm joined by Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald. Day one of training camp, Barry, you were not there because you're still wrapping up a vacation. People don't realize this, but Barry even hustles on vacation. But obviously, the story of the day was about Tua Tagovailoa limiting his participation. This is not a holdout. This is a semi-hold-in. I think we got to take this on a day-to-day basis. What Tua Tagovailoa did today was that he extended what he'd been doing in the offseason program, which was participating in 7-on-7 drills and individual drills only. But then also today, he did take 2 snaps of 11-on-11, but mainly handoffs. I guess, they're working with timing and handoffs and under the center snaps. And I don't really know. How would you describe what I just described to you in regards to a holdout, hold in situation?
Well, I would say it's pointless because I get the thinking of the only way to force the Dolphins' hand without being subject to fines is sitting out 11-on-11s. But with a deal not perceived to be imminent, I just don't know what it accomplishes. So he had 2 snaps in 11-on-11, as you said, handed it off on both of them. And the fact that he didn't throw any passes in 11-on-11, is this going to suddenly make Chris Grier and Steve Ross say, yes, let's guarantee another $30 million.
Well,
let's not.
You didn't watch practice, Barry. You didn't watch practice, Barry.
I did do 4 stories, though, along with you from a land far off. But I will say this. I know that he's doing what he thinks needs to be done, what his agent probably advises. I'm going to tell you what I think the problem is here. I think there are conflicting interests, and this is nobody's fault. I think the agency cannot allow Tua to take a below-market deal. Athletes First is a very good agency. They're looking out for their client, but they also have a reputation to protect. They cannot have Tua take a deal with far less guaranteed money than Trevor Lawrence took and Jalen Hurts took a year ago and Jared Goff took in recent months. So look what happens if they said to Tua, I know you've had concussion issues, maybe take a little bit less. What would happen is other agencies would use that against Athletes First. So here you have Athletes First saying, we've got to get you a great deal. But on the other hand, is that really the best advice to Tua, Omar? If you're sitting there with an offer of guaranteed money that would protect him for generations and his family, knowing the history of concussions, would you take less because of the concussions in the past if you're Tua and just tell the agent, look, this is what's best for my family?
Listen, and that's exactly what the Dolphins are doing and banking on, which is why you can't allow it if you're the agency. And remember, this isn't just about Tua Tagovailoa. This is about future quarterbacks, and it's about your future clients if you're Athletes First. So this is bigger than Tua. And I don't know if Dolphin fans or the NFL universe get that. Same thing with Jordan Love. They are in the same agency. They're going to get comparable deals. Now, the one thing that I'm interested in from both of their standpoints, because keep in mind, nobody mentions this. Jordan Love did not get his 5th-year option. Green Bay said, thanks, but no thanks. But you know what we will do? We will restructure your final year of your rookie deal, and then we'll give you an $11 million payday instead of Tua's $23 million payday. Now, to me, that, yes, he was an unproven quarterback, but that kind of is disrespectful. Athletes First tolerated that, so why wouldn't they tolerate a less than market value deal for Tua Tagovailoa? You know what, to me, and I say this all the time when we talk about this Tua situation. One, he's not going to get a deal as long as Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. Why? Because they got their deals 2 years earlier. So their deals are the 5-year extensions and then the 2 years that the contract inherits, which is why their average isn't this gaudy $50 million or $53 million that people want to portray. The extensions average that, but their contracts do not. So Tua's probably going to get a 5 or 6 year deal. What's the real rate for Tua? Probably something in the neighborhood of $43-44 million a year in terms of real money. I only count guaranteed money.
As opposed to the 55 that's reported for Trevor Lawrence. Exactly. Yeah. But the question is, where do you give yourselves an out if you're the Dolphins and he has injury problems or aggression? This, to me, would be a big contention point in negotiations as far as guaranteed money. You have to give yourself an out. How do you reconcile that if you're the two parties? I think it will get done because both parties want to stay in a marriage, but how do you realistically get it done with those conflicting interests? I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. It's something to continue to monitor. As I said, he looked good, sharp in 7-on-7. He threw one interception on a pass that was tipped up in the air to Tanner Conner. And
Vandenberg with a pick. And I
Zeke,
want to mention this with Zeke Vandenberg. I wrote a story on MiamiHerald.com today about players to watch. Every year, seemingly, there's a Tanner Conner or Julian Hill or a Kader Kohu who seizes a roster spot out of nowhere. So I wrote a story about players to watch in that regard, and none is a favorite for a roster spot. But I will say 3 players on that list play the edge position that the Dolphins so badly need depth at: Quentin Bell, Zeke Vandenberg, Grayson Murphy, the rookie out of UCLA, who had the most pressures of any player in this draft class over the last 4 years at North Texas and UCLA. All 3 of them flashed today, right?
Zeke Vandenberg is actually an inside linebacker, and he's been an inside linebacker since minicamp. And that goes to a position I believe he played at Illinois State.
He was outside some and inside, at 14 sacks there. But he'd be a factor in terms of being able to generate pass rush. I don't know that any will make the team, but Quentin Bell have obviously kept around since last October. We saw him on Hard Knocks last year. I think one thing we learned today,
Mr. Thank you.
I think one thing we learned today is Gavin Hardison's likely not going to challenge for the number 3 QB jobs, right? There's some distance there between Skylar Thompson and Hardison.
He looked somebody who was way out of his depth. I'm not sure what the coaches thought they were accomplishing, giving him that many snaps in it. And it wasn't like the Skylar Thompson or Mike White were getting a ridiculous amount of snaps. No, I think Gavin might have thrown more passes in 11-on-11s than the coach did. Maybe Mike McDaniel's trying to hoodwink Chris Greer and say, hey, see how much we need to it. Other things that I observed today from practice, you know, I have an unhealthy obsession with Calais Campbell. I've been a big fan of his career since I covered him at the University of Miami. Calais is big. When I say big, he's large. He's more than large. He's big. He's 308 pounds. I think he's probably got to work himself into playing shape. Looked at and watched him closely. I have not studied Calais' game in the early years, and certainly not when he was in his 20s. But the get off was quite slow. Was a little surprising to me. Obviously, I look at him more as a defensive tackle now than I do see him as an edge player. He's certainly not dropping back into coverage. And Emmanuel Ogbah looked a little heavy. Did have 1 sack today. Saw him and Calais playing next to each other. Thought, this is interesting. It is going to be. I saw defensive coordinator Walker,
Anthony Weaver.
Right. Pay a lot of extra attention to the edges. Do a lot of instruction to Chop Robinson. Even though you've made these additions, I'm still a little bit concerned. Now, that does not mean they did not get the best of the offensive linemen, because Butch Barry certainly had a nice, spirited speech. Do not know what the topic was, but I'm pretty sure the gist of it was this was not good enough. Now, in fairness to the offensive linemen, pads are not on. And it's very hard for offensive linemen to block defensive linemen without pads, because secretly they need something to hold on to. So when they come out of their stance, they shoot their hands up and they're grabbing for pads. It is going to be interesting to see how that offensive line gets cobbled together. I cannot tell you who worked where, because that violates the rules of the Miami Dolphins reporting period, especially when fans are not there. And I'm not interested in having my wrist slapped so early in practice. Let's wait for week 2 to be a bad boy. Watch Patrick Paul a significant amount of times. It's okay. It's not where it would need to be, but no pads yet. So, and we're not looking.
And Lamb will play, obviously. Yeah, if something happens to Armstead, Kendall Lamb's going to be next man up, at least early in the season, presumably.
Yeah. I did find interesting.
I wanted your view on the whole Jordan Poyer thing the last 24 hours, because the language I thought was shocking, using the word fold on Tuesday when asked about the Bills' perception of what happened when they would play the Dolphins and the Dolphins would squander a late lead. What did you make of that? What did you think of Poyer's first day today? I know he was heavily involved with a pick of Hardison.
Yeah, he got a pick. Mike McDaniel was asked to address that, and so were some of the other players. And Jalen Ramsey's not surprising take was, well, I was only here. I was only here for half a year, and I only played the Bills once. I don't know nothing about that. Plus, this is a totally different team, and hopefully guys step up. And this is really about how many dogs do you have on the team? How many guys do you have that are going to bark and going to fight? I have been a proponent that, yes, I'm right along with Jordan Poyer. We know, let's not pretend this team has been mentally soft for decade two. How many decades?
Yes, it's been December issues for a while. I would say the schedule was a function partly and injuries of the December collapse last year. But you're right. It's happened far too often to rule out mental strength and fortitude as a factor. It's definitely a factor with this team. You saw it late in the Tennessee game, not being able to close.
Yeah, not just that, but when we talk about mental toughness, is also the cold weather games, and I don't care if you go out there with your shirt off or no sleeves on. Let's not pretend like you don't struggle when it comes to these cold weather games. You do. It's traditional issue in Miami in December, but it's about the caliber of the players and the caliber of the fight that's in the team. And I am not one of those people who believes that injuries did not play a factor in how they performed in December and January last year, because it certainly did. If I take away if I take away three of the top weapons from any team, they're going to struggle, no matter what team it is. And that was the case for the Miami Dolphins. And then stripped you of all your edge players, you're going to struggle. And your top cornerback and your top safety, come on. But I will say this. Poyer said something. I doubt he's going to take it back, because that's not his nature. It was the truth, and it was how they are perceived league-wide. You don't think Baltimore has the same perception of the Miami Dolphins? I'm pretty certain that they do. And Mike McDaniel said these are going to be the narratives that you face until you address them, until you end that talk. And it's the same thing with Tua in this negotiations. Oh, Tua can't beat top 10 defense. Oh, Tua can't beat teams and that are playoff caliber team. Oh, Tua. And not that it's only Tua on the field, it's the Miami Dolphins, but these are the narratives that people talk about, and you're gonna hear it until you put a silence to it. Another issue that I found interesting, or topic that I found interesting, is I asked Mike McDaniel a question about Teron Armstead, because we all know who Teron Armstead is. We know what the issue is. I'm a big proponent. Put Teron Armstead in bubble wrap until 2 weeks before the regular season. You could go do individual drills, but I don't want to see you taking a team-on-team snap. From Mike McDaniel's answer, you can sense that the gist is Armstead's not going to tolerate that. He certainly doesn't want the perception that he needs to be bubble boyed. But today, he's healthy and he's in great shape. But today he was missing from practice. So if we're healthy and we're in great shape and we're going to practice sometimes, and then sometimes we're not going to practice, I guess today was a non-practice day.
Well, I agree with you. You can't play him in preseason games. Plus, you need to give Patrick Paul reps against the other team's starters in week 1 and week 2 when we see starters for most teams, especially in week 2, which is the most heavily used starter game now in this exhibition season, the last 3 games. I'm with you on Armstead. You'd like to see some regular work from him, but I'd also like to see Paul get every opportunity for reps in games. So I think that also has to be a priority, because if you happen to lose Armstead for games, which inevitably happens, and if you lose Austin Jackson, then you're going to be playing Kendall Lamb and Patrick Paul, and you need to see what Patrick Paul can do. One thing I also found interesting from McDaniel today, he talked about what I view as the deepest position on the team, inside linebacker, saying he has no idea what the depth chart's going to be. I know Anthony Walker's impressed you. You think he could press for playing time against Jordan Brooks and David Long, who begins this training camp on PUP. Obviously, Duke Riley's there. Channing Tindall is there. You mentioned Zeke Vandenberg. So there's quality depth there. The question is, will Walker, who was a starter in Cleveland and elsewhere, be able to take snaps away from Brooks or Long? That's going to be interesting to me. Long needs to be on the field in traditional running plays because of how good he is against the run. Obviously struggled against the pass. And Brooks, we'll see. He was a high volume, high tackle linebacker in Seattle. Do you want him playing every down here? That'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Was going to ask you about Ezukanma as well. I saw he made a catch today. Do you view him as being on the outside looking in for a roster spot? And do we see him as anything more than a gimmick player entering year 3?
All good questions. Very tough to answer on day one. I would say because of his size, he has to be on right now. Everybody else in your roster is a Smurf, except for Odell Beckham, who's not even practicing, and you have no idea when he's going to practice because he's beginning camp on the PUP. You need, as Eric Ezukanma's size. You need his run after catch skills. You need his toughness. The question is, has he finally grasp the playbook, or is he still trailing River Cracraft in terms of the amount of jobs and roles that he can do? We all know who River Cracraft is. I have stopped counting him out. I have stopped putting him off the 53, my projected 53-man roster. River, you've proven to me that you've earned this coaching staff's respect. You're a special teams guy. You're the wide receiver who knows all 3 positions. You can go in there and play anybody in any role. You make plays. So it's hard for me to say Eric Ezukanma is ahead of River Cracraft, but the truth is, if you cut River Cracraft and you put him on your practice squad, and you attempt to put him on your practice squad, is anybody going to claim it?
I know he's ideal for this offense. It would not surprise me if he is. The vast majority of his receptions have gone for first downs. Coaches around the league know he can be trusted, so I think there's a chance you'd lose him. But yeah, I'm with you. I think he's on the team, so that gives you 5, obviously, with Berrios and Cracraft in whatever order at 4 and 5. So then the question is Ezukanma or Malik Washington your 6? It's hard to envision them cutting Malik Washington after drafting him. I know he took out Javon Holland today, and Holland thankfully seems to have avoided any serious injury.
That was very ugly. That was very ugly. I mean, Javon basically landed on his head, and it was. Oh boy! I don't know what happened there, because this is really not a super contact driven. Holland was just going too fast, and Malik cut back. I have no idea. But next, all I did was see Javon Holland doing a somersault and landing on his head. So that was a little scary, but these things will happen in training camp. It's a physical game. It's football. I'm curious to see where these safeties go. Marcus Maye talked today. He's one of those players where big mystery for me. He had a golden opportunity to pull down an interception today. It was literally right in his hands, and he dropped it. It was one of the many interceptions that Gavin Hardison was throwing out there. You get an interception. You get doing his Oprah Winfrey. I'm curious to see where Marcus Maye fits in, and how they can incorporate it. A lot of that Baltimore defense last year will utilize 3 safeties. If the Dolphins took that approach, you definitely see them utilizing Marcus Maye, Jordan Poyer, and Javon Holland. But when Holland went out, it did not surprise me that Marcus Maye gets that call up and gets that opportunity, which is a good reason why you see 3 safeties, 3 quality starting caliber safeties here on the roster. To address something you said, Anthony Walker was one of the pleasant surprises for me in training camp. I'm certain that guy could play. Still productive today. It'll be interesting to see. One, we don't know what the issues with David Long. He also sat out minicamp. So obviously, if this is something that led to him sitting out minicamp, then it was it's a 6-week injury. Hopefully it's not a knee or something of that nature. We know that he came to Miami from Tennessee, and there was concerns about his durability and soft tissue injuries. We don't know what the nature is of the injury, but hopefully he has a speedy recovery. But I always wondered, it just made me scratch my head. Why is Anthony Walker here? Well, now we know why Anthony Walker is here.
Yeah, and they dodged a bullet with Long last year. And this is not to question David Long's toughness. He's as tough as they come. Really respect the guy. But as Mike Vrabel said, he was a repeat offender, which I can't believe the head coach said that about one of his players, that David Long was a repeat offender with soft tissue injuries in Tennessee. And again, we don't know the reason for David Long's absence, but the Dolphins dodged a bullet in terms of David Long giving them practically a full season last year. So I think you do need the depth with Walker and Riley. I think leave you well covered at that position. That's the only position other than defensive tackle where I have, and safety, where I have a total comfort level. Corner, obviously, we want to see if Kohu and Cam Smith.
You're comfortable at defensive tackle?
I'm comfortable at defensive tackle only in the sense that I think the collection of Sealer and Campbell, obviously, are two clear starters, and Tart and Benito Jones should be good enough. Is it great collectively? No. Are you as good without Christian Wilkins? Of course not. It might not be a great strength, but I don't think it's going to be a weakness because I like Tart against the run. Obviously, Campbell upgrades them, presuming he's not going to fall off a cliff. So you talked to Calais today. You saw him. He's 37. He was a 17-game starter for Atlanta last year, was still an effective player. Do you at all fear him falling off that proverbial cliff this year?
It was the first day, and I haven't seen Calais in years. But if I told you he was the slowest guy off the snap, would it surprise you at 37, though?
No, I wouldn't think so. And you have to give him time, as you said.
Yeah, and I think he said something that I kind of took the hint of what he was saying. It's day one. This is kind of the worst day I'm going to get better every single day. But it looked like day one of him putting on football pads in 7 months. And it probably was, to be fair and honest, it probably was the first day. He's a 37-year-old football player. What do I expect? Unfortunately for me, I have this savior thought process in my head that this guy's going to come here and save this defense. And today was a reality check for me because he looked 37.
Yeah. And there's where you might feel Wilkins' loss. Obviously, that to me is the biggest concern on the team. How do you replace the reliability, the snaps? We knew, obviously, his effectiveness against the run last year. He finally emerged as a pass rusher. Of their 6 leading sack guys, 4 of them are not available to you at this point. Obviously, some of that was by choice with Wilkins deciding that they couldn't pay him the amount of money the Raiders were willing to, with Van Ginkel not wanting to guarantee that extra $3.65 million that was the difference between what Shaq Barrett got before he retired and what Van Ginkel got. So, yeah, I do have concerns both pass rush-wise without Chubb and Phillips and against the run. And that's what gives me pause for thought about this team. It's mostly defensively. It's not on the offensive side of the ball.
Agree with you. Totally.
Are you feeling and you can't judge a lot off day one, but did anything today move the needle for you in either direction as far as outlook for this team as much as any day one in underpants can do of training camp?
The defense dominated today, which is something that I could tell you I haven't really seen on a consistent basis during the Tua era. But you know who Tua is. Tua carves up the defense on a relatively consistent basis. Obviously, the turnovers. If they could produce turnovers like they did today, and yes, it was Gavin Hardison. If they could produce turnovers like they did today, then I could tell you they're probably going to be a pretty good defense. No pads, so it's impossible to judge and evaluate the run. If Calais Campbell can come in here and just set the edge alone, not give you the 105.5 sacks that he's given you in his NFL career, but just come here and set the edge, I think he's going to be a valuable piece. Because to me, more so than the pass rush, I'm concerned about the edge setting. I saw Chop Robinson move and twist and bend, and I was just like, yeah, he's going to be a good rusher. But then I saw Anthony Weaver work with him on technique in terms of setting the edge, and to me, that's going to be the biggest telltale sign of whether or not they can have a good defense. If you can't stop the run, you're not going to be a good defense.
Right, and that concerns me very much early in the season. Weeks 1 at home against Jacksonville, home against Buffalo in week 2, at Seattle in week 3. If they're being gouged by the run by a Bills team that obviously became run heavy after the coordinator switch last year, then that's going to make Josh Allen even better. He's already great enough against Miami as it is. That would be my one concern in September. Without Chubb being back to form and with Jalen Phillips just coming back, will they be good enough defensively? That would cause me concern, unquestionably. And that's why I think you can't kind of assume the fast start that you had the last 2 years. They're going to need to score a lot of points to overcome these defensive questions and the edge rusher health issue. All of these things, by the way, we have stories on MiamiHerald.com. We're going to have 9 stories between Omar and me and our intern and Greg Cody by the end of today on Wednesday. So we hope you'll check out MiamiHerald.com for all of that. We have a 30-day free subscription pass going on that as well. So please check out all of our work there.
All right. Well, that's it for Dolphins in Depth. Barry, we will see you tomorrow for another report of day 2.